Hello. I've just been reminded by Jake Berry, and you say, who is Jake Berry? Well, he's the new chairman of the Conservative Party. I've just been reminded by Jake Berry that today would have been the birthday of Margaret Thatcher. Quite an interesting anniversary, I suppose. And he then went on to say that Mrs. Thatcher, like Liz Truss, stood against the anti-growth coalition of her day of the 1980s. What utter tosh. There was no anti-growth coalition of the 1980s in the same way as there is no anti-growth coalition today. This is a fiction. This is a paper tiger, something that Liz Truss has invented so that she can knock it down and tell everybody that she's been successful, which she hasn't. And more than that, I mean, it needs challenging at source, because to think that people are lined up and grouping together in opposition to you, this is so selfish, so self-absorbed, so hedonistic, so narcissistic, Liz. It simply isn't true. It's not believable. And the huge range of people who you cited even in the conference as being part of this anti-growth coalition, most of them would not talk to one another. It, again, is not true. There is no coalition of anti-growth. Number one. Number two, people don't coalesce over something negative. They're not coalescing over anti-growth. They might coalesce over something positive. They might coalesce actually over growth. They might coalesce over ambition, over enterprise, over imagination, but not to destroy it. There's no organization of spite, which is what you are trying to invent. Well, there might be, and you might have actually stimulated it. There might be an organization which is rapidly gaining pace, which is defined simply as opposition to Liz Truss. That is the only opposition party, that is the only opposition coalition that you could possibly create, Miss Truss. It sums you up. So that's number one. Number two, what is the job now? Because we heard Cleverly running around the studios this morning, getting into quite a pickle, trying very hard to square the circle about how wonderful Kwasi Kwarteng is. Well, he's another person who could possibly create his own coalition. But it's not going to be a coalition against growth. It will be a coalition against Kwasi Kwarteng, or a coalition against Liz Truss, because they're sort of interchangeable. It's like Tweedledum and Tweedledee. And the only thing both of these individuals need is an exit. And they really do need it, in the same way as President Putin needs an exit. They need an exit. And I know it's difficult for Liz Truss, because I've seen the YouTube video. It is difficult for her to negotiate a door. But with help, she was able to find the exit once before. And with help, I'm sure she can find the exit again, but sooner rather than later, because we simply don't have enough time to mess around. If, as we are told, Rishi Sunak may be primed to take over as the runner-up in this ridiculous election over the summer, as the runner-up, well, the sooner he's in power, the better. And then he can reverse this nonsense. And maybe he is the only person in position to reverse all this nonsense, because he spoke against it beforehand, because he has not endorsed it, and because we know that he has credibility when it comes to economics. We know. We may not like all his economic decisions, but we know that he has credibility. So he is the person to do the reversal. Whether that can reverse the damage that Liz Truss has actually caused, I strongly suspect it can't. But it could go some way. I think, should he be brave and reach out to the Labour Party to offer them a position, a seat in the cabinet, to reach out maybe even to the SNP, to offer them a seat in the cabinet, maybe he could avert the destruction of our union. Maybe he could avert the destruction of democracy itself. Now, it's up to the SNP, it's up to the Labour Party to say, I wouldn't touch that with a barge pole, and perfectly reasonable for them to say that. But I think the basis on which Rishi Sunak assumed power should be that he reaches out to other parties across the divide because at this moment now, to get through the next 2 years, he needs to project a level of democracy that we have never seen before. He needs to project a level of confidence that we have never seen before. He needs to be that different spirit that can energize our society and lead us out of this morass. And more than that, I think he needs to seriously consider the anti-racist polemic, which has been the bedrock of a lot of the more vocal proponents of a post-Brexit Britain. The Priti Patels, the Suella Bravermans. We don't have a problem with racism in this country, or we didn't until these people came along and decided the bogeyman was the person who was appealing for asylum. There is only one solution to this problem. First of all, leadership, and the leader needs to speak out against the implicit racism that these two individuals have pursued in their policies. But then, and this is the magic, he needs to move people, civil servants, from places where they are no longer needed. He needs to listen to Rees-Mogg. If civil servants are no longer needed in this particular department, they should be moved to the Home Office, and quickly, because we need civil servants to clear that backlog. It's huge, 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 and if it is not cleared, we cannot know who is or who is not an illegal migrant, who is or who is not staying here without proper permission. If people have applied under the 1951 Refugee Convention, we are still signatories to, then we are duty-bound to honour that pledge to look at their asylum application, whether we like it or whether we don't. And if we don't like doing that, henceforth we have to have an international conference, and we have to, as a group, renegotiate that 1951 convention or leave it. And I think it would be a great mistake if we left it. We would be calling ourselves, well, we wouldn't be making ourselves into international pariahs. There's enough of those gathering, and we don't particularly want to have a federation with those. We don't particularly want to be part of that anti-growth coalition. No, if we don't like the 1951 Refugee Convention, we need to redefine it. And up to now, up to the point where there's a redefinition, we need to process the paperwork. And if we don't, we're simply lazy and heartless. And that's not in the British character. That's not part of our spirit or our identity. So we need to use all these civil servants that Rees-Mogg says are not being used properly. Because we're crying out for them. We're crying out for somebody to do that job. There is a job for them to do. They've got something, they've got useful work they can get on with. Let them get on with it.